Bitcoin is essentially a monetary phenomenon, and the reason we call it a monetary phenomenon is because when you break down this phenomenon to its core, it comes down to people locking into sunk costs. Bitcoin wasn't the first of its kind. Seashells were used as currency until the 19th century. Even in modern times, on certain islands, if the money supply runs short, bundles of seashells are used as currency. That phenomenon is observed. Seashells are inherently worthless, right? They have no intrinsic utility. However, there's a cost involved in collecting those seashells. So 2 years ago, when I first started my YouTube channel and suggested Bitcoin was a monetary phenomenon, someone scoffed at me saying, so if the Bank of Korea printed bills and, instead of machines, had artisans meticulously draw portraits of Shinsaimdang by hand, would that be sound money? They raised that counter-argument. I considered it an excellent counter-argument, and I even featured it in a video back then. That's exactly the point. What the monetary phenomenon implies is this. Compared to money that's mass-produced with security features by a printing press, if artisans drew Shinsaimdang by hand, that money would actually be closer to sound money. Of course, this isn't a binary issue. It's not that something is or isn't sound money. It exists on a spectrum. That's true for seashells, and if you consider gold too, its value isn't based on utility, but on the cost involved in mining it. Similarly, because of the electricity cost involved in mining Bitcoin, its price has downward rigidity, making it closer to sound money. When we say this, people who know a bit about economics argue that it violates the sunk cost fallacy. However, economics should be based on observing how people actually behave. It's not supposed to be a moral or theoretical lecture telling people how they should act. Economics has kind of lost that spirit. Modern economics, that is. Now sunk cost is actually at the core of monetary phenomena, but under the rational human model, like the one that created the efficient market hypothesis. It's impossible to explain sunk cost, but you can test it. How can you test it? It would cost a lot, so let's just try it in our heads. Imagine a really fancy buffet. People come to a really nice buffet. Imagine it's you. If you've learned a bit about sunk costs, you'd know this. Once you eat until you're full, you're done. Even if you think, this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, so I should eat as much as possible. The decision was already made the moment you paid 300,000 won for the buffet. Eating one more lobster, or forcing yourself to eat more to the point of discomfort, won't bring your money back. The right move is to stop when you're most satisfied. That's a classic example of sunk cost theory in economics, but we can observe whether people actually behave that way in real life. You can imagine an experiment with controlled variables like this. People come in, each having paid 300,000 won to enter. Suddenly, a bell rings, and they announce, it's free, eat as much as you like. That's the twist. Today's a special day. Our very own Mr. Otaman, a 2.5-star lecturer and major GNC shareholder, he's covering everyone's meal. Everyone claps, and they start eating. Now compare how much food these people eat with random samples from other days. Days when everyone paid the normal price. We take the average from those days and compare it to the average from the experiment day. If people really aren't influenced by sunk cost, then even if they initially made the decision to pay 300,000 won and then got their money back, then logically there's no reason for them to eat less. They had already decided to enjoy the buffet when they made the decision to pay 300,000 won. But if someone refunds the money, they might think, oh, then I don't have to eat that much after all. There's no reason to force themselves to eat more. So they think, I'll just have a little. So they eat less. Then on that day, if you look at things like ingredients, there'll be traces of differences in consumption. Sure, some individuals will eat more, others will eat less. But we look at the average. So it's a statistically meaningful experiment. You'd need to run this experiment multiple times and rotate the location so people don't catch on. You rotate between different restaurants and run the same event, then you compare the results. If the data shows that based on sunk cost, people eat less when they're refunded, then you could write a meaningful academic paper on it. But the cost of running that experiment, astronomical. So we don't do it. Yes, there are those challenges. Still, we can run the simulation in our minds. So then you have to ask the efficient market hypothesis, the idea of a perfectly rational and calculating human. I study geopolitics, so from my perspective, the kind of human I see is very different from the economic model of rational man. Still, even I had a few assumptions shattered by Bitcoin. So now I ask, does sunk cost really not lock people in? That's the question worth exploring, and that's where the GNC experiment comes in. GNC is an experiment, specifically a sunk cost experiment, since monetary phenomena are rooted in sunk cost. You can think of GNC as a test of that. It's like that thing Kahneman and Tversky did in the ultimatum game. If you don't assign roles randomly and instead say, you're a grad student, he's an undergrad, people start to get stingy, even if they didn't do anything to earn it. If they feel they have some qualification or entitlement, they won't give things away for free. So, at the cost. Even though it's just a bit of code, really. Because it was paid for to be made. Because they paid to own it. They don't just toss it around lightly. That's why we handed it out on Daechongbong Peak and on Gwanaksan Mountain. Starting next week, we'll be giving it out to those that eat at a certain BBQ restaurant. Now, this isn't some kind of advertisement. I'm not saying the meat is better, nor that it's worse. What's really important is that this is an experiment. All participants are aware that it is part of an experiment on monetary phenomenon. More importantly, there are many people watching. The restaurants don't pay us anything. We're not being paid advertisement fee. And it's not unlimited. There's a limited amount. So you just go eat the meal and casually pay 100,000 won. Not that casual, right? Or maybe you pay 200,000 won. All we promise in return is a piece of paper. How much GNC will be given is unknown. It's not a contract. So you just receive it and maybe use it to make a paper wallet like Bitcoins. Now the real question is, even though you paid for your meal, what you got for free, not like an airdrop out of thin air. But to get GNC, you had to hike a mountain or go to a BBQ place and eat or visit a cafe. Because of that, will you assign value to it? That's the question I'm really asking. And of course, my hypothesis is that people will assign value. We've seen it through the Bitcoin phenomenon. And don't forget, through the Bitcoin phenomenon, when we re-examine past monetary behaviors from a humanistic perspective, things like the Swiss dinar, seashells, and even gold, economics used to emphasize utility. But we realize it's not. It was really about cost. Bitcoin helped crystallize that truth. And I thought, maybe we can replicate that. Of course, it'll take time. But the real question is, if someone climbed all the way up Daechongbong and received this thing that's just a piece of code, which in terms of utility is basically just a Bitcoin practice tool, no one would treat it as real Bitcoin, no matter where you go. But if that still ends up having value, then it shows us something. People really do get locked in by sunk cost. That becomes clear. So it's with the same cost as. We're not offering any discounts. The meat is sold at full price. The coffee is sold at full price. If we expand these kinds of places nationwide, any of our members who are interested will do it. Of course, printing the paper costs money. All of that is covered by Autoverse because this is an experiment. It's not a huge amount anyway. We'll even ship them. So all we do is send out these pieces of paper. It's not like these businesses are paying us for boosting their sales. We don't receive any money from them. That's the key point right there. Just like Kahneman and Tversky found, if you tell someone that they're a grad student and they correctly guess the weight of steel used in the Eiffel Tower, a lucky guess really, suddenly they become stingy toward their partner. Kahneman and Tversky discovered things like this. But now, through insights from the Bitcoin phenomenon, we can see just how deeply people are affected by sunk cost. That's why mileage points, collectible stickers, and those things work. To get a Pikachu sticker, some will travel all the way to Gangneung. It's all part of the same behavioral pattern. Let's take a closer look together. Stay tuned. It's coming soon. Humanities scholars and social scientists can conduct and replicate experiments like this. It's just that controlling variables is hard. So we rotate them and mix them in different ways. All right, thank you all.